Now, let me say something about the city of Jerusalem. In Zechariah 14:2, I want to point out one thing about that passage. God is saying, I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. You know what he's saying there? He's saying the world is going to be against Jerusalem, and Jerusalem's going to be a Jewish city. It's going to be the centerpiece of Jewish and Israeli life in the last days. He talks about that. He says the city will be taken, and this will happen during that tribulation period. Houses rifled, women ravished. Half the city will go into captivity, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. But the point I want to make is Jerusalem is a Jewish city in these last days. In 1967, the Jews, for the first time since biblical times, took the city of Jerusalem. That's what made that so big. But you know what? Israel said, we've got our Jerusalem back. We have our beloved Jerusalem back. And the world is saying, oh, no, we do not accept that. We do not recognize that. And so Israel centered their government in the city of Jerusalem, the Knesset, which is their parliament, right there in Jerusalem, the prime minister, right there in Jerusalem. The government is working out of Jerusalem for the most part, but the world will not recognize that. And all of their consulates and embassies and everything are down in Tel Aviv. They say, no. Tel Aviv is your capital, not Jerusalem. And they've been staunchly standing against that. Do you realize the United States Congress several years ago passed a resolution to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem? That was something the Congress approved several years ago, but they kind of gave an out. They said, when the president feels like the timing is right, let's do that. No president has felt the timing was right. You realize, oh man, we'll get the whole Islamic world against us, not to mention maybe the rest of the world. Until guess what? We've got this crazy guy in the White House. Yeah. And he did it. He didn't care what the world thought, he just did it. Jonathan Cohn, he made that announcement last year. Jonathan Cohn, wrote the bestseller, the book, The Harbinger, and he made this statement. This was an event of colossal magnitude, gigantic, politically, historically, biblically, and prophetically. This has never taken place in all the years of Israel's existence. You know what Prime Minister Netanyahu had to say about that? I'll tell you when I can turn this page over. There. Here's what he said when that announcement was made. Yesterday was a momentous day, an important one. Jerusalem has an extraordinary history, and over the millennia, you can cite a few significant milestones. Yesterday's statement by President Trump is such a milestone. The UN immediately condemned the move 129-8. The nations condemned it. The Turkish foreign minister said the whole world is against that. Pope Francis spoke out publicly against this move. Interesting, Zechariah chapter 12, verse 3, again, Old Testament prophecy, said, it shall happen in that day that I will make Jerusalem a very heavy stone for all peoples, and all who heave it away will surely be cut in pieces, though all the nations of the earth gather against it. And this is what we're seeing today. There were a lot of people that were all for Trump's announcement, but didn't believe that he was actually going to do it anytime soon. Well, once again, man, we've got a loose cannon in the White House. He just went ahead and did it this last year. The U.S. Embassy is now in Jerusalem, and they're declaring that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. And so now it's beginning to have an effect. The first country that moved their embassy to Israel beside the United States was Guatemala. Yay, Guatemala. But now there are several countries that are beginning to move in that direction. that are giving indications that they're going to move their embassy to Jerusalem also. And among those are Italy, Australia, Brazil, and the Czech Republic. So, brethren, despite the world's attitude, more and more, Jerusalem is seen as a Jewish city, as the center of Jewish and Israeli national life, as Scripture said it would be at the end of the age. So, the world's desire as a whole has been, number one, to divide the city. We'll divide the city, We'll give East Jerusalem to Palestine. And it's part of their plan to divide the country. 1967, God gave Israel virtually the whole place. And immediately the world said, oh, no, you can't do that, you can't do that. We must divide the land up. And so that's been the plan of the world ever since. A separate Palestinian state, some way to divide the land. Do you realize that in the Bible, that parcel of land God calls his own land? He says, this is my land. And I'm going to give it to my chosen people, Israel. It's for them. Of course, the world, oh no, you don't. You know what I find interesting along that line? The prophet, again, Old Testament prophet, we're talking about prophecies that were in long before Jesus was on the scene. The Old Testament prophet Joel, in chapter 3, verse 2, God is talking about the time he's going to judge the nations of the world. He will judge them. And he says there, I will also gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations. Rome did that. Destroyed the temple in 70 AD and began the process of scattering the people around the world. And he says, whom they have scattered among the nations. They have also, grab this, divided my land. That's modern times. You've got Rome scattering them, and you've got the modern nations of the world dividing the land, And God says, they're going to come into judgment for that. Because that's my land, and I gave it to my people Israel. Interesting. So brethren, we have Jerusalem becoming clearly the center of the Jewish nation and Jewish life. And that is in preparation for the events of the end times that are described in the Bible. So there we are.